Hi, friends, and welcome to Life Intended, the podcast for women on a journey to take ownership of their own lives.
We're your hosts, Kelly Berry and Sadie Wackett, leaders, coaches, friends, and women on our own journeys of self-leadership.
Here, we don't believe women need to be fixed.
We believe they need to stop seeking permission and start leading lives that they choose and they design.
Life Intended is about unlearning truths that have been handed to us and start trusting your truth and living in alignment with what matters most.
Each week, we're bringing you bold, honest conversations that challenge the stories holding you back, help you uncover and step into your own voice, your own purpose, and your own power.
From inspirational guest interviews to unfiltered chats between the two of us, you'll leave every episode with insights, tools, and the kind of encouragement that sticks.
This is your space to wake up, break free, and lead the life you were always meant to live. Let's get into it.
Hi, and welcome back to Life Intended. Today, Sadie and I are here to share a conversation, and these conversations are something that we are bringing to you in season 2. This is foundational to what we want to be doing with Life Intended. And so what this looks like is we are going to be bringing a topic or a theme, something that we feel is extremely relevant into how we are operating as humans. And some of these topics and themes that we are bringing, they are probably subconscious. You're not really aware of them, or if you are aware of them, you're not exactly aware of how they're influencing how you are moving through life, how you're behaving, expectations that you have on yourself. There's a lot of nuance here, but I think that they're going to be really insightful conversations, should be really fun, and should lead to some aha moments or maybe even some moments, just some interesting things that you may surface about yourself if you take the time to kind of like get into the conversation with us, sit with these topics, reflect on them. And Sadie always does such a beautiful job taking us through them, giving examples, making them really easy to understand. And, as always here, I think she'll give some really actionable tips, but it's optional. These are things that you can become aware of. And then if you choose to, or if you'd like to make change, we'll give you some ideas and some ways to do that to help move through life maybe a little bit easier or with a little bit less friction. So, hi, Sadie.
Kelly,
How
how's it
are you?
going? I'm doing great, thank you. And this may be one of the favorite topics of mine. Like you said, we're going to bring topics to this group of listeners on areas that we may or may not be conscious about in our lives, but they certainly direct our experience of life, whether we choose them or not. And so you mentioned the word awareness. I really want to underscore that to begin with, that all these topics that we're going to be raising, the intention is to bring into your awareness much more of your own internal programming and how that might be directing you in your life. There's a phrase that I love, and I think it's very important to kind of share this at the outset. It's that with awareness, there's choice, and without awareness, only habit. So, if you think about what Life Intended is about, it's about creating a much more intentional and self-directed life. And that starts with awareness. So, if you're happy, we can dive in.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do it.
All right. So, as I said, we're going to be exploring something that's very personal and very individual, but also quite universal as well. It's the topic of identity. So that's essentially who we believe we are and how that shapes how we move through the world and the experience we have as we live our lives. Identity is not something that necessarily stays the same. It evolves. It's something that we inherit, we absorb, and yet it is something that if we choose to, we can redefine and reclaim for ourselves as we grow. There's the classic phrase of an identity crisis. And so people often think about, when you reach midlife, you have a midlife identity crisis. Well, this can actually occur due to various different factors. Most commonly are big life changes, like whether you have a complete change of career, a change in relationship, a traumatic event, a birth, becoming a parent. These are all major events that happen in life, which can lead to kind of just a reflection or a confusion about our own purpose, our sense of self, what role we play in society, etc. So this is designed to be a conversation about, waking that up to ourselves. And anyone who's listening, there'll be some questions that Kelly and I talk through this, and just think about those as we cover them, and how that might apply to you. I always do. There'll be a little bit of teaching and some conversation. So hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a much better appreciation of how this can inform and help you in your life. So I'm going to start just by sharing a bit about how we form our identities. Obviously, when we are born as babies, we have no information. We have no concept of biases or stereotypes or judgments. These are all shaped and absorbed by us through our early socialization. So whether that's our family of origin, whether that's the society that we've grown up in, whether that's the religious institutions, the school, the culture, and in that way, it's very much assigned to us. It's not chosen by us. And I think a few kind of quite common, as we work with women, and we hear this a lot, quite common identities and labels, if you like, that we grow up with is to be a good girl, to be strong, be the achiever, be productive, be pretty, be thin, and the list goes on. So the world teaches us through these different inputs who to be long before we learn to listen to who we are ourselves. And so if I just take a moment to think about what I was assigned with as I grew up, well, I remember one of the strongest kind of messages that I received was to behave, be quiet, don't upset others, keep the peace. And as that evolved and developed through my life, it looked like people pleasing. It looked like even when I was in tough corporate environments, I would find it very difficult to question, to challenge, and I would want to keep the peace. And as a result of that, it really challenged my own kind of voice and my own growth and my own potential. How about you, Kelly? What do you think are some identities that were assigned to you as you were growing up? Did they come
Yeah.
from society or your family?
Yeah, I think the easy ones are probably the ones that came from family. And labels is a really good way to think about them too, especially when we're in this context. But, I was easy. So probably my family will get a chuckle out of listening to this. Compared to my sister, I was the easy child. I was obedient. I was good. I think some other labels were like independent, respectful, smart, that plays into the whole like fixed mindset thing. But some of just like you're talking about, like the good, the easy, the independent led to the people pleasing part. I'm good. I'm not here to make waves. I'm not here to like insert what I want over what somebody else wants. A lot of those things. And so and I think it's important to note, like, a lot of these labels that we're given, especially in like family contexts, like, they're not malicious. They aren't given with the intent that they're going to like cause you turmoil when you become an adult, but the way that you framed it, where these labels are informing us of who we are before we're aware of and able to tell ourselves who we are. And so I think if we can think of it more as like, well, it's not like I am that and that's a bad label. It's like I want to become more true to the labels and the identities that I want
That you choose. Yeah.
and that I choose. Yeah.
And when you're aware of them, you can make those choices.
Hmm.
So it's actually, the word persona, this is a fun fact, which we now identify with personality or identity. It originally came from, it meant the mask that an actor wore on stage. So the actual mask was called the persona, and it wasn't the actor's true face. It was a role or a projection in a performance. So it was the performance mask that they
Mm-hmm.
wore. So when you think about it, that's what we're doing today. We're kind of wearing this persona that is a mask, but is it the mask that reflects our real face, or is it a mask that somebody else gave us? And over time, like those masks become so familiar to us, we think they're like our real face, but they're not actually our true face.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing to notice as well, we can talk a bit more about some examples because that's helpful. But these identities that we've taken on, they have served us. They've served us well. So, in my example, I guess I was the complicated one, the more challenging one. And so my role, I guess, in sort of trying to keep the peace or not wanting to overstep boundaries too much kept me safe. It kept me kind of in relationship with the people that I needed to and wanted to be in relationship with. But then it can start to confine us because I realize, well, I'm not really allowed to express my real voice. So it's kept me safe and it's kept me accelerating through a career journey, but it hasn't really been me. It's been this mask that I've been wearing. And that's when you realize that when something happens, whether one of those life events happens, and you start to feel like the weight of this mask is becoming too heavy, that's when you can question, like, how did I get this mask? And is it a mask that I want to continue to wear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's all really good. I like that persona thing because I think it just makes the intangible a little more tangible. It makes you, when you can think about, I'm putting this on and taking it off, it feels more like something that you can make a change to rather than something that's a part of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's also, you can think of it a bit like, to continue this theme of the stage, think of it like a script. We're living our lives until we can become aware of it. We're living our lives according to a script that somebody else has written. Our family wrote it. School friends wrote it when they were bullying us in the playground. Our society wrote it when they were telling us how girls need to look. Our bosses shaped it and wrote it when they were telling us how to be quiet and not to speak up. So the scripts are being handed to us. We learned to live by those scripts because that kept us safe, kept us progressing, kept us kind of quote unquote successful. But when you realize there's this dissonance between what you feel, what I feel is successful, and what everybody else feels is successful, that's where the rubber meets the road with this topic. And we want to start asking the questions about, well, what do I choose? Who
Mm-hmm.
am I without the mask?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I when I stop performing on this stage for everybody else? I know for me, I felt like I went into work for many, many, many years, like I had to put on a suit of armor. And if I didn't go in with a suit of armor, then I would be so porous that I wouldn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that for me, when I realized that, there was a very kind of it was a very helpful realization. And then it was very difficult for me to continue. And I did continue for a long time, but I continued in a sort of a place of like dissonance or misalignment or discomfort, and it was painful.
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly say when I started living into what I felt inside, when I was able to really access that and listen to that inside voice, life changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Dramatically. The energy I feel now, the compassion I have to myself and others, the view I hold of the world, it's very much changed.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of that resonates with you, Kelly.
Yeah. I mean, all of it. I think, my story, I had to have like a tragedy or kind of like a moment that kind of snapped me out of the autopilot. But, to look at my life and again, like I think I would say obedient was a label, but that turned into obligation, never wanting to let people down became like, woven in there with like perfectionist tendencies and high achieving tendencies, but kept me, again, like you were saying, like safe, like, and, for all intents and purposes, like, kind of like happy, it's like I was doing things that felt safe and comfortable. That was a big one for me, like being very comfortable. But when I realized, I can't even answer the question, like, what do I want? What do I need? Then it made me start looking at these things and seeing how I was making choices, or I guess like or not making choices, just, going on autopilot, and I didn't know, like, if I could make a choice right now, I don't even know what choice I would make,
Yeah,
like,
you just don't know yet.
without somebody's help or without, just letting somebody else make the decision for me, and so that's where I really had that awareness, and also and this is, I think, kind of an interesting point, my identities looked very different in different contexts of my life. So there was like a professional identity, there's a personal identity, there's like an athletic identity. And in some pockets of my life, I was like acting in a way that was very true to myself. But in other pockets of my life, I was not. And it's like I couldn't blend these two like parallel universes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I wonder if I might ask you, was the experience of your life where you were operating, in a way that you felt was very true to yourself, was your experience of life different than the experience of life in the area where you weren't?
That's kinda deep. I'm not sure. I mean, probably, it probably had a lot to do with the amount of autonomy I felt in some areas of my life, and I think this is pretty assumptive, but I think maybe a lot of listeners might resonate with this. In one of my, like, more recent roles that I've had, my identity as a mother, I feel like I operate in that role very much in alignment with who I am and what I want and how I want to be. But still, in some of these other like silos in my life, it's not transferring. And so I think probably a lot of people, maybe that's a point of just reflection. Like, why am I able to operate in this role in a way where I'm like tapped into myself? I know what I want. I know what's right. In other areas, I'm not.
And maybe, we could spend another time talking about this. It's a question of safety, where you feel safe to
Hmm.
operate in that way.
Hmm.
Because, a lot of our conditioning as well, especially as women, is if I show who I really am, will I still be accepted? Will I still be loved?
Mhm,
And we often trade off our authenticity for acceptance. And I think I don't know, I mean, this is my experience as well, but certainly as a mother, the love is unconditional. And so I can be myself because I want there to be that and that non-condition.
mhm,
I don't want to be conditionally loved by my daughter or give her conditional love. And so
mhm.
that just is as we're talking through it, that's my expression of that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I think safety has a lot to do with it. And I think as well, as we become more aware of our own identities, it could potentially disrupt the dynamics we have with other relationships in our lives. So somebody said, if you want to see your future, look at who your friends are now, or something like that. I think I've butchered that, but basically is look around you, see who you're associating you with in your life and who you identify with, and it's likely that that's going to shape your future. And as we like evolve in our chosen identities, it can bring up all these senses of fear or guilt or grief if we choose to move away from people who maybe aren't serving our true identity. And that's when we get to redefining boundaries, and we are starting to speak new truths, or, maybe the people that only knew us with the mask that we were wearing don't align with us without the mask. And so I think
Hmm.
there's a real, it can be quite an evolution as we explore our identity and what we want. Um, in terms of the relationships we hold around us too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And,
Yeah.
those are maybe as you become more aware of it, they are easy things to identify, but very hard changes to make. And so I think that's where a lot of the tension comes
Yeah,
in, and
that's
those
exactly
things can
it.
feel extremely
Yeah,
uncomfortable, extremely
yeah,
challenging,
yeah.
take long time to make change to.
Yeah, and that's where, this so-called crisis that we have, people may go and do crazy things or spend lots of money, or, go and enter into a relationship with another person. It's because there's a big shift, and we're trying to wrestle with the fact that there's something going on inside of us. So we do something outside of us to try and appease that discomfort, try and
Hmm.
fix the problem. But we're not going to find the answer to that problem outside. It's going to be inside, which actually is a nice segue, because, we've talked a lot about identity and what it is, and how it's shaped, and how we can feel this dissonance between our kind of given identity and what we choose. But how do we know what our identity is that we are searching for, we're seeking? And I think the only way we can start to unpick that and uncover that is by curiosity and inquiry. So I will I think one really helpful tool, perhaps the most helpful tool in this, is self-inquiry. So there are three questions I'll pose here, for the audience. Answer and sit with, and take some time, get your favorite drink, sit there and a pen and paper and just write these out. But which identities do you hold that were chosen for you? Which identities are you outgrowing? And what identity do you want to reclaim? So I'll say those again. Which identities do you currently hold that were chosen for you? Which am I outgrowing? And what identity do I want to reclaim? And then I think, as we think through those things, there are small but intentional steps we can take today, tomorrow, this week, next week, to help us move towards them. This doesn't have to be radical change. It's a journey, and it's constant exploration, it's self-inquiry, and it's asking ourselves the questions around, well, what do I value? Who am I when I'm in this role? If I was allowed to make any choice tomorrow where there is no risk, what choice would I make? What
Hmm.
values do I want to live by? Do I feel that there's part of myself that's been silenced so far? When have I felt like I really wanted to say something but didn't or couldn't?
Yeah. Yeah. What are these thoughts that I have telling me when I'm in this situation, and I'm performing in a way that really isn't in alignment? Do I stop and listen to my thoughts? Do I just let them pass? Now, I think, listening to your thoughts and then getting really curious about them, to your point, like the inquiry, that's very helpful. Yeah.
I mean, it's if anyone listened to the conversation you and I had, when we were talking about, restarting this podcast, one of the things that I said was, this has been so far a 13-year journey for me. And there's no joke in the fact that I have been inquiring and wondering and testing and feeling all the discomfort over the last 13 years. And I probably knew some of the changes I needed to make. In fact, I knew some of the changes I needed to make in my life. I just didn't make them. And so I sat with that discomfort, knowing that I was, I guess, living in an identity that didn't fit me any longer.
Hmm.
So happy to share more about that another time. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's, I think, brings us to maybe quite appropriate close.
Yeah, yep. I think that's perfect. Hopefully, and I'm sure that conversation is causing some reflection and some just, hopefully curiosity in some people. But I do think it's one of the things, if you're unaware of it, you'll start to see it a lot and start to feel it. And we'll offer this after every conversation. Sadie and I are very accessible. If you want to talk about it, if you want to discuss it further, we'll always offer that to
Yeah.
you.
I would I would say as well, this is the work that we go into in a lot more depth in the work that we do in Life Intended, the programs, the coaching, etc. So if this is a topic that resonates and you feel kind of compelled to explore further, there are other ways to do that. You can get in touch. And I think I'd leave with you know, the analogy of the script and just reflect on whose script are you performing at the moment. Is it the one that was written for you, or is it the one that you have written for yourself? And if it is the former, then what do you want to start writing for yourself?
Perfect. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Sadie. It's a
All
great
right, Kelly, good
conversation.
to see you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Life Intended. Life Intended is more than just a podcast. It's a movement back to self-trust, personal power, and living with intention. So keep showing up, keep tuning in. If you're ready for more support on your path, head to lifeintended.co. We've got tools, community, and programs to meet you where you are. Until next time.